What is going on, all of my Master Tier members? Welcome to Sector for Nerds exclusive content. Today I'm here to give you guys my thoughts on Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. It is good to be back here once again chatting with you guys. This is now our second official $10 tier video that we've done, so I'm very excited about that. For all the people that continue to subscribe to my $10 tier, thank you guys so much. But to get us started here today, you guys, I think we bring on the man who has done many intros for me for like the Clone Wars discussions that we do. You know, he'll do all the Tom Kane narrated stuff for me. And I thought, you know what, why not have him on here to do the movie opening crawls as well? So without any further ado, as we begin to start talking about Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, intro guy, take it away. There is unrest in the Galactic Senate. Several thousand solar systems have declared their intentions to leave the Republic. This separatist movement, under the leadership of the mysterious Count Dooku, has made it difficult for the limited number of Jedi Knights to maintain peace and order in the galaxy. Senator Amidala, the former Queen of Naboo, is returning to the Galactic Senate to vote on the critical issue of creating an army of the Republic to assist the overwhelmed Jedi. As always, thank you, intro guy. Now, when it comes to this movie, you guys, I definitely like this movie better than The Phantom Menace. But at the same time, I also think that Phantom Menace is a better overall movie. And I'll explain what I mean as we move further on in the story. But everything starts out with Padme arriving on Coruscant. Her ship gets attacked. But don't worry, you guys, Padme didn't actually die. It was just her stunt double. Though I did question why she still stuck around there, like when there was the potential that the killer could have still been around. As the opening crawl had said, right, this separatist movement, there's a lot of star systems that are leaving the Republic, joining the separatist cause, but Palpatine's like confident, right? My negotiations will not fail. And Mace Windu says, well, if they do, you must realize there aren't enough Jedi to protect the Republic. We're the keepers of the peace, not soldiers. Yoda talks about how the dark side has clouded everything and it's impossible to see the future. The irony of all that, considering who's in the room. When Padme appears at the meeting with the Jedi, there's like this moment where she's like, I think that Count Dooku is the one that's behind this. And then we've got Dickhead there, also known as Ki-Adi-Mundi, who's like, he's a political idealist, my lady, not a murderer. And Mace Windu takes a moment to jump in as well, like, you know, my lady, Count Dooku was once a Jedi. He couldn't assassinate anyone, that's just not in his character. You sure about that, Mace? You know, we talked about how, with the last movie, right, with the Phantom Menace, that we had a lot of villains in that movie between, like, Newt Gunray and the Trade Federation. You had Darth Maul, you had Darth Sidious. But, like, all the villains were working under one dude, right? Like, the big boss was Darth Sidious. This movie, every villain, there's like a different level of hierarchy and power. Zam Wesell, the one who attacks the ship, is working for Jango Fett. Jango Fett is working for a guy called Tyrannus, who we know to be as Count Dooku. And then Count Dooku is working for Darth Sidious. Hierarchy. The scene when Obi-Wan and Anakin meet with Padme. And this is the first time that Anakin has seen her in 10 years. And if you guys remember the last time we sat here and chatted, remember how I talked about, man, it felt like after the Phantom Menace, it felt like Anakin lost everybody that was close to him. Not in the sense that they all died. I mean, obviously Qui-Gon did, but he wasn't allowed to see his mother anymore, and Padme was off, you know, on Naboo doing her thing. All those important people that were in Anakin's life are gone, and now Anakin's having the opportunity to see one of those people again. And he's still obviously got a thing for her. One of the things that I'm really not a fan of in this movie is the romance dialogue. When she says things like, oh, Annie, my goodness, you've grown, and he goes, so have you. You've grown more beautiful, I mean. Like, Obi-Wan's just standing there awkwardly, Captain Typho's standing there awkwardly. Oh yeah, Jar Jar's there too. Poor Jar Jar, he didn't really have much of a role in this movie compared to the first one. One wonders if the fan backlash towards Jar Jar had anything to do with that. At the same time, though, he does give emergency powers to the Supreme Chancellor, so that's kind of a big deal. The way that Anakin argued with Obi-Wan while they're in front of Padme and Typho, like, speaking of awkward conversations, if that was Qui-Gon in that situation, like, he would not have put up with that stuff. We find out as well that Anakin has been having a lot of dreams about his mother lately. Obi-Wan tries to like reassure him, right? Like, don't worry, dreams pass in time. And this movie was what? Took place in 2002. So I think 3 years this was made after Phantom Menace. But in terms of world that is Star Wars, it's 10 years between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. So it's like Obi-Wan's like a fully fledged Jedi Knight at this point. Anakin's the young, brash Padawan. Padme gets promoted from queen to senator. I always just find that funny. She explains it later, but I still find it hilarious. Eventually, they do go after the killer, right? Do Obi-Wan and Anakin, and they got like a fun speed chase going throughout Coruscant. And this is the movie, you guys, where we actually get to explore a little bit more of Coruscant than we did in the first movie. Here, we're actually getting to explore, like, you know, not necessarily like the underworld of it, but we're getting to see like the street level, you know what I'm saying? And they go into the bar and everybody's having drinks, and then one of the most iconic Star Wars memes, you want to buy some death sticks? I do love the way, though, that they filmed that scene where, like, Anakin's walking around the bar looking at people. You'll just have, like, random ladies in there looking at him like, oh, look at that handsome fella. And then you'll have, like, Zam just walking in a direction with her blaster pointed. Obi-Wan's at the bar, and it's, like, this really intense moment of, like, okay, who's gonna find who first? Sure enough, it's Obi-Wan who takes the lightsaber, slices Zam's hand off, and Anakin walks over and he's like, easy, Jedi business, go back to your drinks. From here, we kind of split off into two different directions for this movie. You've got the Obi-Wan side of things where he's going to track down the bounty hunter, trying to figure out who he's working for. And then you've got Anakin and Padme going to Naboo to make sure that she's safe, and, you know, that hence the whole love story thing goes. You know, now that I'm thinking about it just now, you guys, I feel like the Jedi have a way of putting people together that end up giving into attachments and having relationships. Because not only do you have Anakin and Padme, who end up, you know, forming a relationship, they get married, all that stuff. But then, you guys, the book Dark Disciple, the council assigns Quinlan Vos to go and try to assassinate Count Dooku, and they want him to team up with Asajj Ventress. And then they fall in love with each other. Funny how that stuff works. There's a scene between Anakin and Chancellor Palpatine. I think it's the only interaction that we get between them in this movie, but it very much sets up everything that happens in Revenge of the Sith, right? You can clearly tell that Palpatine has had an influence over Anakin throughout the years. He says, oh, so they've finally given you an assignment, huh? Your patience has paid off. And he says, well, your guidance more than my patience. And he goes, you don't need guidance, Anakin. In time, you will learn to trust your feelings. Then you will become invincible. It felt very, like, Sidious-like, you know what I'm saying? And just the way that he delivered that line. Like, there's certain lines that he does in Revenge of the Sith, does Ian McDiarmid, where you have, like, the Palpatine side of him, right? But then every so often he pulls out something that almost sounds like a little bit more of the Darth Sidious in him, you know what I'm saying? They did that with Maul in Star Wars Rebels as well, where he just sounds like an old man, but then there's just certain moments where he's talking with Ezra and you hear the Darth Maul part of his voice. So I think what we're gonna do, you guys, is instead of trying to, like, go between scenes talking about the Anakin and Padme stuff and Obi-Wan stuff, I think we'll just focus on the Anakin and Padme stuff first, and then we'll go over to Obi-Wan, and then we'll kind of conclude with, like, the final 45 minutes of the movie. I feel like every scene that Anakin and Padme in, there was just some form of, like, thing that just made me want to cringe. I feel like this is one of those movies, if I was watching it with other people that, like, weren't Star Wars fans, I feel like I'd just be slightly embarrassed. Sometimes I'll think to myself, man, if I ever have a girlfriend one day and she's never seen Star Wars and I have to show her Attack of the Clones, like, how does that go down? Their first conversation is about attachments, how they're forbidden, but then they talk about compassion, which is essential to a Jedi's life, is encouraged, so one might say that we're encouraged to love. Ugh. So then they eventually get to Naboo. Padme talks about how she went from, you know, having 2 terms as being queen, and then she ended up becoming a senator because the new queen wanted her involved in the government. They even tried to amend the Constitution so that Padme could have stayed in office. Didn't work for her, but apparently it did work for Palpatine, you know what I'm saying? Then we get a scene with people within the Naboo government. They're talking about, you know, there hasn't been a full-scale war since the formation of the Republic. Another crucial thing that they bring up here, which is interesting, because like we haven't seen anything with this particular person yet, but it does play into stuff that happens later. Because I feel like the only villains we really see at the beginning of the movie are Zam and Jango. We only hear about Count Dooku. We know that Darth Sidious is still out there somewhere, but they bring up after 4 trials in the Supreme Court, Newt Gunray is still the viceroy of the Trade Federation, which, first of all, I feel like shows you how corrupt the Republic government is if that was able to happen. 2, it now means that we have another person to worry about out there. And you gotta think, well, most likely, the dude's probably plotting something against Senator Amidala. Because as we learn later, the dude just doesn't know how to let go of a grudge, you know what I'm saying? And eventually we get the I don't like sand scene, and then they have their first kiss. You know, Padme can say all she wants that she shouldn't have done that, but like, she didn't try to stop. Like, when Anakin went in for it, she went in for it too. So clearly she felt something. When we talk about, like, the cringy parts of Attack of the Clones, I think the scene where they're just sitting in that dark room confessing their feelings to each other is just mad awkward. I'm haunted by the kiss that you should never have given me. My all-time favorite, though, you are in my soul. Or you are in my very soul. I feel, though, like this relationship, though, affects Anakin more than it does Padme. Because once again, you know, Jedi, they're not allowed to have attachments. They're not allowed to be married unless, you know, you're Ki-Adi-Mundi and your species are dying. Anakin proposes to keep it a secret, but Padme's like, well, then we'd be living a lie. Throughout this adventure, Anakin continues to have bad dreams about his mother, so it takes them to Tatooine, where they're reunited with Watto. I do think that deep down, Watto was happy to see Anakin, like, the fact that he was all grown up and a Jedi Knight. I think he, like, even though Watto is kind of a piece of crap, but I think he did genuinely care about Anakin. So he was like, oh man, it's good to see that you seem to be doing well for yourself. I'm sure he was probably a little freaked out, though, like, when, you know, Anakin probably was gonna, like, threaten to kill him if he didn't give him the information he wanted. But their journey eventually takes them, though, to the Skywalker homestead. I mean, I guess not the Skywalker family homestead, but the Lars homestead. You get what I mean. They meet Owen and Beru, and it's revealed that Owen is Anakin's stepbrother, because we find out that Shmi got married to a guy named Klee Lars. And then here they kind of discuss the story of what happened to the mother. It's one of those scenes that, like, I always just, like, envision in my head. Like, the dude does such a great job telling the story that I'm able to, like, create the pictures in my head of what happened, and it's like, wow, this is dark stuff. But Anakin eventually goes to look for her. He finds her. I'll say this much, at least they were able to see each other before she died, right? For the mother to look at his son and see him all grown up, for the son to be able to see his mother one last time, that moment when she dies, Anakin taps into the dark side. And it's one of those where, like, even Yoda senses what's going on. Like, and the fact that, like, Tatooine is, like, halfway across the galaxy compared to where Coruscant is, and he feels the disturbance in the Force of how Skywalker is in pain, terrible pain. And then he goes back to Padme, and he's just, like, super frustrated, like, it's all Obi-Wan's fault. He's jealous, he's holding me back, and then says, like, I killed everyone, not just the men, but the women and the children too. I think she just sees, like, the pain that he's in, and she obviously cares about him, so she's trying to be there for him. So I want to put a pause on that part of the story, because I want to go over to the Obi-Wan side of things, which I think is a little bit more entertaining in my opinion. Obi-Wan makes a couple different stops in this movie. So he first goes to his friend Dex. He's got a diner, they get some Jawa juice. Good old Jawa juice, they gotta sell that at Galaxy's Edge. That's the next big thing, Galaxy's Edge, come on, you know it's true. And so Dex tells him about the dart, it's a Camino Saber dart. Talks about the cloners that are there. And so Obi-Wan goes to look in the archives, and he talks with Jocasta Nu, who's a little bit of a jerk. If it does not appear in our records, it does not exist. So then Obi-Wan goes to Yoda, who's training younglings. This scene was very adorable. So then they realized, well, someone definitely did erase the map from the archives. But who and why? Only a Jedi could have erased those files. So then Obi-Wan makes his way to the planet Camino. He gets there and he finds out that the Prime Minister, Lama Su, is expecting him. After all these years, they were beginning to think that he wasn't coming. Visible confusion. He's got no idea what he's talking about, but he kind of plays along with it, right? And they find out that this army was ordered by Master Sifo-Dyas. And then they find out that he was killed almost 10 years ago, which would have been around the time of Phantom Menace, right? And he said, well, this army that we made for him is meant for the Republic. And so they go around to inspect the units. And I love this scene, you guys. Like, every time I get to this part of Attack of the Clones where, because, man, I love the clones so much. And especially, like, as you watch the Clone Wars as well, and you become invested in each of these guys just, like, as individual characters, it's just done so well. I love what the micro series does with the clones as well. So every time I see the Clone Troopers, I'm always excited. But Obi-Wan does find out that the original host for the clones was a bounty hunter called Jango Fett. And so I think at that point, Obi-Wan was kind of like, oh, a bounty hunter. This could be the one I'm looking for. For anybody that watched the Attack of the Clones anniversary panel, oh, how many years would have been? Like the 20th anniversary of Attack of the Clones. They did that panel at Celebration a few years back, and one of the stories that Ewan McGregor told was they were struggling to get young Boba's reaction, properly to what was going on with Obi-Wan being there. And Obi-Wan's like, all right, when I walk up to you, pretend as though I've just done a terrible fart. And that's like how they got his facial reaction for what they needed. By the way, for anybody who hasn't watched that panel, go back and do so. I think it's actually one of the panels that they do have on YouTube now, because Star Wars Celebration, they like to hide all their panels now behind the paywall, and you can only see it if you're there, which is really stupid. But this is one of the panels that they did air on the live stream. And man, that panel, you guys, there was no reason for it to be as great as it was. And the reason it was so great was because of Tamara Morrison and Daniel Logan. So go back and watch it for those two. They completely stole the show. But anyway, back to Attack of the Clones. Obi-Wan has a meeting with Jango, and that's where we learn, I was recruited by men called Tyrannus on one of the moons of whatever the planet was called. A little bit later on, Obi-Wan has a conversation via hologram with Yoda and Mace, talking about the cloners, how Sifo-Dyas ordered the creation of a clone army. And then Yoda, after they get done talking with Obi-Wan, Yoda and Mace have a moment where Yoda's like, man, blinded we must be if creation of this clone army we could not see. Really going to show you that the dark side of the Force has really messed up the vision of the Jedi. So then eventually Obi-Wan has a confrontation with Jango. This is like one of our first big fight scenes of the movie. Eventually he gets away, and then they have like a space battle scene with the good old seismic charges, which I absolutely love. Right before they go off, there's like that split second of silence, and then I'm like, yeah, let's go. One of the greatest sound effects in Star Wars. But eventually Obi-Wan goes down to Geonosis, and he is spying on a meeting between Count Dooku and the Separatist leaders. And there's a moment where Obi-Wan has like this shocked look on his face, like, holy crap, what's going on here? Because he also sees that there's a bunch of battle droids that are being assembled. This is our first time in the movie that we see battle droids as well, right? So it's like, yeah, someone's building a droid army. We see that like Count Dooku's having a meeting with like Newt Gunray, all these other leaders. Techno Union. Is that your disposal, Count? Banking clans on board, trade federations on board. They're going to build an army greater than any in the galaxy. The Jedi will be overwhelmed, and the Republic will agree to any demands that we make, according to Count Dooku. So eventually Obi-Wan sends this message to Anakin, but he's not on Naboo. He finds out that he's on Tatooine, so it's like, all right, we'll send him a transmission. He can retransmit it to Coruscant because Obi-Wan's long-range transmitter has been knocked out. And the message read as following. I have tracked the bounty hunter Jango Fett to the droid foundries on Geonosis. The Trade Federation is to take delivery of a droid army here, and it is clear that Viceroy Gunray is behind the assassination attempts on Senator Amidala. The Commerce Guild and the Corporate Alliance have both pledged their armies to Count Dooku and are forming a... Wait, and then Obi-Wan gets attacked by a destroyer droid. So then the Republic kind of panics a little bit, right? Like, more happening on Geonosis than has been revealed. Masamida's like, this is a crisis. The Senate must vote the Chancellor emergency powers. And then the Chancellor goes, well, what senator would have the courage to make such a change to the amendment? And Masamida goes, well, if only Senator Amidala were here. I almost wonder if that was a way to, like, get Jar Jar to step up because they knew that Jar Jar was in her place and he wanted to step up for her. So he does what he feels is right. But this is also one of the big themes of the prequels, right? Is this idea that the people that have a democracy are voting to kind of give their democracy away. So we get the, I love democracy, I love the Republic. Good old Pelps. And he takes the power and he says, as my first act with this new authority, I will create a grand army of the Republic that will counter the increasing threats of the Separatists. So that basically sets up right there, okay, there's a war that's about to go down here. Mace Windu tells Yoda he's going to go take what Jedi we have to go to Geonosis and help Obi-Wan, and Yoda was going to go visit the cloners on Kamino. I actually wouldn't have minded seeing a scene in the movie where Yoda goes to Kamino, but then at the same time, I feel like it was probably just the same type of scene that we got with Obi-Wan. They probably took him through the whole tour and everything. Now, the reason why I like Attack of the Clones more than I do The Phantom Menace, even though I do think that overall Phantom Menace is a better movie, the final 45 minutes of Attack of the Clones is so freaking good that I kind of have to put it above Phantom Menace. Like, of the 11 Star Wars movies, if Phantom Menace was 9th, Attack of the Clones would be 8th. Solely for the 45 minutes of amazing stuff that we get here. The conversation between Obi-Wan and Count Dooku, where we learn that Dooku was the master of Qui-Gon. We learn that the Republic is under the control of the Dark Lord of the Sith, which is very interesting because the Jedi don't believe it. But what Dooku says about the Viceroy of the Trade Federation being in league with the Dark Lord of the Sith, he was betrayed 10 years ago. To us, he very much then alludes to the fact that Darth Sidious is Chancellor Palpatine. But like I said, once Anakin and Padme get to Geonosis to go rescue Obi-Wan, everything just picks up from there. They go through the factory, eventually they get captured, and then we eventually get to the arena. Padme admits her feelings to Anakin. I think part of the reason why she was so willing to do it right there as well is because I think she kind of figured they were about to die. But they get to the arena, Obi-Wan looks disappointed at Anakin, and he's like, I was beginning to wonder if you even got my message. Anakin's like, well, we retransmitted it just as you requested, Master. And then we decided to come and rescue you. Obi-Wan looks up at the fact that he's still in chains and goes, good job. And then we get the good old Reek, the Acolyte, and the Nexu that go to attack our 3 prisoners. Even when they do get away from all the monsters, right? And it feels like, oh, everything's, maybe they can finally get out of there. Nope, in comes a bunch of destroyers. Oh boy, how do we get out of this? Oh wait, here comes Mace Windu. But not just Mace Windu. We got a whole mess of Jedi in the crowd, just putting out their lightsabers. And it's also very cool as well, right? Like, once you see the micro series in the Clone Wars and you understand more about these Jedi, so then when you see them in the live action movies, it's like, oh yeah, here we go. We got everybody here, you know what I'm saying? And I'm gonna tell you what, you guys, the first time that I watched this movie, one of the things I always loved about Star Wars, man, was just like the lightsabers. I always thought they were so cool. I love lightsaber battles. I love when they're being used. And the moment when we see all of the Jedi rushing at the battle droids with their lightsabers in hand, slicing them all up, I felt like a kid in a candy store. That part of the movie was like my candy store. I've always loved the Battle of Geonosis, you guys. And we've really never gotten another scene like this in Star Wars, which is actually kind of a shame. I want more large-scale battles like this with a bunch of Jedi and stuff. And if we even went back to the days of the Old Republic, so we could have a bunch of Sith too, and just the Jedi and Sith fighting each other, lightsabers aplenty, I would love that. You know what I'm just realizing right now, you guys? I haven't even mentioned anything about C-3PO and R2-D2 yet, which I feel is a bit of a shame on me. C-3PO is not naked in this movie. He has parts, but they're not the gold plating. It's just silver. He actually goes with Anakin to Geonosis. And of course, R2 is Padme's droid, so she tags along with them too. R2 actually saves Padme at one point from getting turned into a crispy corpse. Eventually, C-3PO ends up turning into a battle droid, so there's moments throughout this battle when they're in the arena where 3PO's just like, die, Jedi! Oh, wait, what did I say? But there was a point in this battle where it started getting really crowded in the arena, and we were losing a lot of Jedi. There weren't that many left, and there were a whole mess of battle droids. And they all kind of like lower their weapons for a second, and it's like, yep, they got them. But that was the whole trick, right? Put the Jedi in a position where there is literally no way out except for this clone army that's about to save them. Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon get brought onto the field because we didn't really see much of them throughout the battle, but that's because they were trying to shut down the shields. There's some deleted scenes that I really wish they would have put in the movie where Ki-Adi-Mundi and Plo Koon are like working their way onto one of the Federation ships, and they're trying to like go onto the bridge and shut down the droids, kind of similar to the way that the battle from Phantom Menace ended, right? Like they blew up the droid control ship, all the droids shut down. And there's a moment, and I love the way that it was done too, where like Ki-Adi-Mundi gets to the control switch and he shuts down the droids. And there's like a brief moment where it's like, there's like still, it feels like there's a bit of tension still, because it's like, okay, wait, did we actually do this? Is it over? And then shortly after, it's like, nope, the droids get back up again, and they find out they're not dependent on the control system, which would be smart, right? Like, surely we would have an alternate strategy in case something like that ever did happen again, you know what I'm saying? I think you can actually find the deleted scene on Disney Plus if you go to, like, the extras portion for Attack of the Clones. But anyway, the clones end up saving the Jedi, and then we get, like, the first official battle of the Clone Wars. We've got the, Jedi leading these clone squadrons into battle, and they're taking on the Separatist droids. Man, I remember when Anakin and Obi-Wan had their argument because Padme falls off the ship, and Anakin's like, put the ship down, and Obi-Wan's like, I can't take Dooku alone, I need you. We have a job to do. Like, I remember after watching that, like, okay, there's no way they defeat Dooku. Like, they gotta be on the same page here, and if Dooku's a former Jedi, that means he's gonna have some skill. You guys gotta be on the same page here, and because they weren't, right, like, Anakin was reckless. I'm taking him now. Dooku just force lightning, throws him off to the side. And I'm like, oh, this dude knows force lightning. And he's got a red curved lightsaber, which I always found weird. And I'm sitting there like, okay, Obi-Wan, like, you've defeated a Sith before. Like, come on, you can do this, right? Nope, because as it turns out, Dooku's actually a really good swordsman, and he cuts Obi-Wan in, like, the arm and in the leg. And then right before he kills him, Anakin gets back onto the field. He takes Obi-Wan's lightsaber, and he starts battling Dooku with two sabers, which I thought was so cool. It doesn't last long, though, because Dooku cuts one of them up. Dooku makes quick work of Anakin. And Dooku, I love the way that it was shot, too, where Dooku kind of, like, looks down like, all right, well, my work here is done. And he kind of has this look like, wait a minute, he kind of tilts his head up, and I'm like, oh, it's Yoda! Because up to this point, you guys, like, we've never seen Yoda fight before. Like, if you watch the original trilogy first, and you get to the prequels, right, like, even in The Phantom Menace, he doesn't do any fighting, he's just on the council. And Yoda's just sitting there, like, he doesn't pull out a lightsaber, but he's using the Force on things, and he's blocking Dooku's Force lightning, and Dooku goes, it is obvious that this contest cannot be decided by our knowledge of the Force, but by our skills with a lightsaber. And I'm like, Yoda's about to pull out a lightsaber. And he does, and it's a little green one. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then all of a sudden, Yoda just starts jumping around fighting Dooku. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. See, this for me was like why I could never put Phantom Menace above Attack of the Clones, because everything from like the Jedi battling with their sabers, man, in the Battle of Geonosis, to the lightsaber fights with Dooku, and like Yoda versus Dooku was just so good. Like, as a kid, this was just the stuff that made me go, man, I love Star Wars so much. Every time I watch Attack of the Clones, it's like hard to get through like that first hour and 15 of the movie, but once we get to that final 45, man, it is just like, it's so worth it. Yoda says, fought well you have, my old Padawan. Okay, so wait a minute. Yoda trained Dooku. Dooku trained Qui-Gon. Qui-Gon trained Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan trained Anakin. We got ourselves a little bit of a lineage thing going here. We're knowing the hierarchy of who trained who. Hierarchy! But the reason Dooku's able to get away is because he, like, pulls down this giant pipe that's going to fall on Obi-Wan and Anakin, and Yoda has to, use the Force to save them, allowing Dooku to make his getaway. Then we see Dooku traveling to Coruscant, and it's like, well, wait a second, what could he be doing here? He's going to, like, this dark section of Coruscant. What is this? And lo and behold, it's Darth Sidious. We didn't see him all movie. Like Phantom Menace, he was like frequently appearing and stuff, right? Talking with the Trade Federation and with Maul. But here, this is the only scene that we get with him in this movie. He says, welcome home, Lord Tyrannus. You have done well. And Dooku says, I bring good news for you, my lord. The war has begun. And he says, excellent. Everything is going as planned. And that, scene later where Obi-Wan and Mace are talking in the Jedi Council with Yoda. And Obi-Wan says, I have to admit that without the clones, it would not have been a victory. And Yoda says, victory? Victory, you say? Master Obi-Wan, not victory. The shroud of the dark side has fallen. Begun. The Clone War has. And we see all the clones like marching around assembling. We see Palpatine looking on with some senators. You see Senator Organa, who, plays like a small part in this movie, nothing major, but he kind of like punches the railing that they're on a little bit. Like he's just kind of mad, like the fact that there's this war starting right now because he knows like it's not going to be good for anybody. And, in 2003, I think it was like a year after this, right? Like we get the Clone Wars micro series. Years later, we get the Clone Wars animated series, which, kind of retconned the micro series. But either way, you guys, like the Clone Wars to me, I think is like my favorite time period of Star Wars. Because I absolutely adored the micro series when I watched that. I absolutely adore the Clone Wars animated series. And then the scene that closes out the movie is the wedding between Anakin and Padme. Man, that happened fast. They go from like not seeing each other at all for 10 years to all of a sudden they're married. And the only witnesses there were the priest, C-3PO, and R2-D2. I wonder if maybe they figured as well that given the fact that there was going to be a war starting, and I think, everyone kind of knew it, right? With like the separatist movement going on, that war was most likely going to happen. Maybe they kind of figured like, okay, maybe we should probably do this now in case we never get the chance to do it later. So yeah, you guys, that is Attack of the Clones, all my thoughts on it. Overall, you guys, like I said, I like this movie. There's definitely other movies that I like more than this. Anakin and Padme stuff was fine in some parts, cringy in others. The Obi-Wan Kenobi stuff was pretty cool. But once again, you guys, like that final 45 minutes of that movie, man, I love it so much. I mean, I feel like that's where the name Attack of the Clones comes from, right? From that final bit of the movie. So yeah, you guys, thank you guys so much for joining me here today. Thank you to all of my Master Tier members. Next month, you guys, we are going to be talking about the final movie in the prequel era of Star Wars, and that is Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. I cannot wait for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time.